Hello folks, so right now I'm getting ready to do my final sanding of the wallboard. Sorry for the light, but I've got all the walls mostly prepped, including the ceiling there. And this is probably 5 iterations so far, I think. Yep. From laying down spackling anywhere and sanding and then repeating that 6 times so far. Or 5 times. I think this will be the 6th iteration, 6th and last sanding. And then I can prime today. And then I can start on the pan, putting in the liner, putting down the mortar for the pan. I hope to do that today. And then I'll be heading to the river to continue taking out the chimney. Anyway, so we're nearing the end of the tedium and getting into more of the fun finishing in this master bathroom. Anyway, I hope you enjoy. So I wanted to just give some folks an idea of what my process has been, because I'm not a professional sheetrock guy. There's 3 principal parts of doing the sheetrock mudding. So you've got the screw holes or nail heads that you need to cover up. You've got the joints between 2 boards that are on the same plane, and then corners. And in order of difficulty, clearly it's easiest, medium, and I would call this pain in the ass difficulty. So the trivial part of this is normally you have to go over it twice. You have to put your initial mud down, and this is assuming that you drove your screws in deep enough. This is a case where the screw didn't go in parallel to the plane, and it didn't go in quite far enough. Putting a screw in wallboard requires that the surface of the head be just under the paper, so that the screw isn't ripping the paper in the transition from where it's flat to being under the screw head. That's the only way that a screw or nail has any ability to hold the wallboard, is if you didn't rip the paper underneath the head. So if the screw is just a hair below, then you can wipe it with some spackle, and that's probably fine to sand, and then you're done. On the flat areas, preferably you want to use where the wallboard edge becomes thinner. Those are intentionally meant for joints like this. And I don't know if you can barely see the tape, the mesh tape that I put under here. So you put the tape down, a little bit of mud, let that dry. And then you're supposed to use a wide knife and put a whole swath going across the whole joint. And especially where you have a joint where it's 2 lines coming together like this, you're not going to have that depression in both joints. So this is where you're going to have to come back and forth a couple times, creating a little bit of a hump where you had no depression between the panels. And actually, this is the case, I think, where I had no depression. But, well, no. Okay. So the challenge with this here is that you're going to tend to put down a thicker layer of spackle, which is going to leave air bubbles. And you need to go back and fill those air bubbles. Here is an example of where you can see these little tiny air bubbles here, which I'm not going to bother to fill. But I came back and put a super thin, just to fill in the air bubbles. So I'm going to sand this with a pretty light grit, like 120. Normally I've been using 100, and you get these lines here, but the paint will start to fill that in, especially if you're doing a coat of primer and then 2 coats of finish paint. But bigger holes than this, you want to fill in with these a skim coat like that. Here's another case where this is the sanding I need to do today. It's just to do a really light sanding to remove the fills of the little holes, the air bubbles that were left in a thick layer. And then the joints here are a real pain in the butt. And so what I ended up doing was I'd put the tape in, and I do a little bit of mud on each side just to hold the tape in place. So that's iteration 1. Iteration 2 is you sand a little bit to break off any humps that would cause an extra thickness of spackle. And then you'd only do one side. And you do the edge of your knife and just go down the whole side, boom, 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 and make it super smooth, not paying any attention whatsoever to the other side. Because then when you come back and sand this, it'll almost be done. And now you have a hard edge to put your knife against when you go down the other side, and only pay attention to that. Let that dry, and then you can sand that. And you might actually be done at that point. That would be 3 iterations. So you might have to come back and do a 4th. Here, for example, you can see a little bit of tape through there. That's still smooth, so I'm not going to bother to go back and cover that up. But if there was any fuzziness because I hit that, then you might, and it's in a place where people are going to see it, then you might want to go back and hit it again with mud and sand it lightly. But same with here. You can see a little bit of mesh. Maybe. No. Right there. And that's going to be behind the counter. I don't care. So this here is the transition between the wallboard, and I've left this here to wrap around the hardy backer. This is going to go around the hardy backer, and I'm going to have mortar or thin set on this surface of the hardy backer. But then I'm going to remud this here, the edge, because that's going to be painted. And then tile is going to be on the edge here with on the hardy backer. So actually, it might be a hard edge, like a metal trim, that is the edge of the tile instead of the edge of the tile itself. But anyway, that's to be determined. So that's been my process for doing this. It's been long and tedious, but I'm not a professional, and normally professionals could do this in 2, maybe 3 iterations. Takes me 5 or 6. I think my result is pretty decent. I wouldn't call it professional, but it's better than some professional things I've seen. So you can make your judgment that way. Anyway, time to get cracking.
Springtime, senses feel the change. To deny the love that's in your heart is to try to rearrange an order that's been given before it all began. The seasons are a circle that fulfills an ancient plan, but we're losing our connection. There are networks that connect us, like there is no night or day. But every new connection brings us further away. Like satellites, our homes become lock ourselves away with all the love that's in our heart. We're losing our connection. Angels and their eagles flying above us. The hawk is watching over the path of those who love us. The only things that we hold sacred are the things that we've created, and the things that we condemn and fear are the things that we should hold most dear. And we're losing our connection.
All right, folks, I got the liner in, and I think I've got everything overlapping. So in the step here, we'll have these corners here. So the liner is solid from that wall down across, up and over to here. And it's also solid from there down and across and up a few inches under this ledge or joint here. And so we've got 6 corners. We've got the corners at the step, and these are prefabricated PVC covers that will be glued into place, and they're meant for this purpose. And then, of course, the seat wraps up. And I've got, so the seat overlaps the top joint of that. And then I've got this piece right here overlapping that miscellaneous pieces underneath. Well, I've stapled it, but anyway, where this corner folds. So that's all going to be covered going down this way. Of course, another joint here. And around the corner. So this is our little cubby. Probably overkill, but there's a piece under here where the corners are lapped. And then the rear goes around, and then these corners, this overlaps this edge of here, of course. And then the corners come in and get glued in place like that. So with everything glued, these 6 corners glued, and of course I've stapled things in places, but these are all high up where, of course, this is all going to be covered with backer board, which is going to have this fiberglass tape on it, and with thin set acting like spackle wood, and to hold everything together. So the thin set plus this fiberglass tape is the structure for the backer board and helps to make it fairly waterproof. And then you've got this liner behind it and the tile on top. So the point is that this thing is going to be very difficult to leak. That's the point, right? Since I did the priming of the walls and put in the shower pan, I've been busy doing a lot of the backer board. So just to give you a little rundown of where the backer board is at the moment and some features. So on the threshold, which is this guy here, of course we don't screw into there. I screwed into here just because this is on the outside of the shower. The liner clearly goes under, but I'm also going to be, after I tape and with the mesh tape, which you can see here, all the joints are going to be taped and thin set. You treat thin set like it's a spackle on the backer board. And so that connects all the joints, seals everything together. And then I'm going to be painting that with the sealant, the liquid, what do you call it? I forget the name. Anyway, it's a waterproofing that tile can go directly onto. So I will be not only sealing these with the tape and the thin set, but I'll also be sealing them with a liquid membrane. So I've done some fancy joinery in here. So right now the status is I'm almost got basically the first layer of backer board going up. So in here you can see where we would keep stuff like shampoo and whatever, soap. Anyway, and of course the liner basically comes up to this point. So the liner goes from this surface in, wraps around, comes out and wraps around, and there's corners. You may have seen in the previous section, there's corners here, just like there's corners, the PVC corners here and here on the liner, and also down there and there. And then this piece of riser here inside. The mortar is going to come up to probably about this level here. So it's only going to be about an inch or inch and a half of lip for the threshold. In here I did some fancy joinery to help support this guy. This guy is still a little loose. There's nothing holding him in except the fact that there's this joint here that supports this board until there's mortar around it and under it. And then same with this end. There's a lap joint here where this board extends into there, and then this board extends in under it to support this guy. This right now is just literally resting on top, sitting on the liner on top of the threshold, which is 3 2x6s stacked. And then I went a little crazy as a woodworker and actually dovetailed the seat together. So this little chunk right here was cut out by mistake, but it's only about a 1/16 or an 1/8 of an inch deep. Anyway, so the vertical part of the seat has the tails going into the top of the seat. And then, of course, this board is not only pushing into that wall, but it's also keeping it down. And same over here. This is pushing this way, and then this is pushing down that way to keep this whole assembly against. So there's no screws that are holding this to the plywood or the liner. I did put some lines going this direction of liquid nails, as not to glue this surface, this backer board to the liner, but to act as a filler in case there's a gap. So that when you stand on this, once the liquid nails hardens, it will serve, if there was any gap at all, if the liquid nails didn't spread out completely, it kind of serves as a little intermediate bridge to fill the air gap to provide some support for the middle of this seat. Otherwise, there's no screw or nail penetration into the liner except at points like on the sides. This is about 3.5 or 4 inches up, and same there. That's the lowest nail there, or screw there, and then I've got a screw here. There is a screw down here. It's going through a liner, but this is like 10 or 11 inches off the floor. So these little screws going into here, these are stainless steel, and these will be embedded in the mortar to help further support the weight of this. Any force pushing down on the seat will be supported by this thing. So this dovetail joint is relatively tight. So in fact, it's probably a little better than I could do in most woodworking situations, doing it by hand. But that's meant to keep this joint nice and tight. And then of course this joint will also be wrapped with the tape and then thin set spread on it. Same with all these joints. So this whole thing is going to be turned into one piece with the tape and thin set, and then have a liquid membrane painted over it, so that belt and suspenders kind of thing for using the liner as the most reliable way to make it waterproof. And then in order to keep as much water out from underneath the tile as possible, putting the liquid membrane over that, and then tiling. This will be extremely waterproof. So I still have to do that. So the tile is going to go all the way up to the ceiling, just not on the ceiling itself like it used to be. And then this junction here between the wallboard and the backer board, we're going to use, the little tile edging. It's not tile. It'd probably be like the aluminum rounded edging that you put on the wall, and then the tile goes right up to the edging, and that forms a really nice smooth boundary that isn't tile based. But of course, we'll be sanding this flush, putting the thin set on it, and then when we tile, we'll actually attach that border to it that will finish off the edge of the tile itself. Anyway, that's the status as of Tuesday, April, I don't know, end of April.
Live in a nondescript small little town where the sun comes up and the sun goes down. Got McDonald's and a Walmart, but no more downtown. And I guess you've probably been there, where everything's franchised, so everything sells for 5 pennies less. And stuff flies off the shelves. And everything here is like everywhere else. And I guess that you've probably been there, probably been to my town. My town, my town. All out of shape, 'cause we don't go outside, but we all have 3 cars from which to decide. Why should you walk a block when you can ride? And I guess you've probably been there. 'Cause with satellite, you can get so much TV. What does it matter that there's nothing to see? 'Cause you can pirate the cable and you can get it all for free. And I guess you've probably been there, probably been